But if he actually goes a field, then does a field study, right, and goes out and goes into the exchange houses, and he asks, "Hey, I have some Lebanese lira. Can I buy some dollars?" And well, okay, I guess they are having a hard time selling the dollar back to you, or if they do, the price difference between what they buy and what they sell is so huge that tells him, that tells us that the people who are actually changing the money are not falling for the media tricks or for the government tricks. Hi everyone, this is Arpad from Starpath Academy, and today I want to talk a little bit about the Lebanon boiling interview series that I recently did with a gentleman named Ali from Lebanon, where he gave us intricate details into life under hyperinflation in Lebanon currently and what is going on after Lebanon has experienced its hyperinflation since October 17, 2019. So we finished that interview and there was a lot of information shared there. And I thought maybe we could spend a couple of minutes to recap that and try to distill some knowledge out of that, distill some wisdom out of all the knowledge that he shared with us. So if you haven't seen those videos, then I encourage you to take a look at the description of this video. You will find the series there, the full 5 videos. So please go and watch them all, and then come back and watch this video as well. However, there are a lot of details shared there that I won't be able to go into, and it's through his words, so I think that is very important. Ali, if you're listening, I want to thank you again for being part of that interview and sharing all that knowledge with us. I know it must have been difficult for you, so thank you very much, and I would love to have you on the channel some more. Now, here I have papers upon papers of notes from those, and there is just a lot, and we won't be able to consume it all, but let's just recap some basic ideas. So hopefully in the next live video or something like that, you guys have questions, and then I can probably answer them, or we can have Ali on and have him answer it as well. So let's get to the meat of the things, right? So the Lebanese lira, there was a fix, basically a peg to the dollar, right? And it was around 1,500 Lebanese liras to $1, and the cost of things were pretty much the same, and in the sense that the peg was true when you kind of went into stores to buy stuff, right? And it was people were using it interchangeably when trusted it. Now he later tells us that in the banking system, Lebanese liras were treated differently, and there was a lot of interest paid on Lebanese liras. So technically, the government or the banking system still wanted you to store your money in Lebanese liras, but people on the street were using it interchangeably. Sometimes you would pay in dollars, you would get Lebanese liras as change or something like that. So that's a very important note, because that was something that was very they were accommodated to that, right? Now on, and he starts that people wake up, right? That's how he starts it, that people wake up one morning and there are protests going on, right? And that was caused by the slight lack of dollar supply in the system, which temporarily broke the peg, right? That was the idea, that okay, it broke the peg and the dollar went from 1,500 to 1,800, and now suddenly people felt that there was some issues here, and then from there on, and the Lebanese lira started depreciating, inflation started happening, not necessarily to the dollar, but the dollar was gaining value compared to the Lebanese lira. And Then the protest grew and grew to the point where the government and the banking sector said, oh my God, there's a safety issue. We need to close the banks, right? Everybody needs to close the banks for 2 weeks. And basically that was it. All the banks closed, ATMs and everything completely, and lo and behold, right after 2 weeks when they open, the ATMs are no longer working. And if they're working, they're allowing you to take out money, roughly $50 per week. And you have to have a good explanation why you're taking that money out and so on. So of course that just made things further worse, but that was the thing that happened at that point. It was clear to everyone that something has happened, right? But it's very important to note here that people woke up to some protests, right? And that is maybe if you saw it on television or something like that. So eventually, of course, the devaluation got further and further worse because people now lost the trust in the Lebanese lira, and they wanted dollars, right? They wanted dollars for their Lebanese lira, or they even had dollars in the system, but that was stuck in the system. And later on, even that $50 per week limit was just taken away, and all the dollars. And he tells us in later videos that even that was taken away, and your dollars would be locked up into a savings account for 2 years, right? And they call those lollers, and we'll get into that. We'll get into those a little bit, but basically, the dollars has split in two: digital dollars stuck in the Lebanese banking system, and cash US dollars that you had in your pocket or something like that, or stored somewhere else. And anyway, so the black market appeared. Well, black market, I mean, it's just people trading different currencies. That was the case in Romania as well. Friends would trade currencies. If somebody was working for one currency, they need a different thing. People would trade, but there are these people who are, that's their profession. That they're just trading currencies, right? Or currency houses, currency trading houses. You can still see them in Eastern Europe. We have a lot of them where you would go and you would just trade your currency. So that they call it black market, but it's really the actual market, right? The market determined value of the dollar. So that has went from 1,500 to eventually 10,000, and then from 10,000 up, spiked up to 20,000, right? So it took more and more liras to buy dollars, because it took more and more liras to buy actual produce, actual stuff that you would need. But the dollar cost was pretty much the same when you were buying products with your dollars. Right. So that's the actual price of dollars. But if you take a look at Google, or if you take a look at, the government pages, they actually still think that, the peg is intact. There's nothing to talk about here, because if you go into the bank and you bring in dollars, that's what they, give you, 1,500. Of course, you would have to be dumb to do that, but the facade is still kept, that the peg is still working. At some point, even they kind of had to change that, and they came up with a different system how to measure currency based on what is being used, because a lot of subsidies came in. And then you have these different system where it's dollars that were put in the bank after October 17, 2019. Those are traded with the bank at 3,500. Then there are subsidized dollars that are used by the bakers and some other industries, food industry or something like that, and they subsidize dollars there for like $5,000, 5,000 liras per $1, and so on. So suddenly, the banking system comes up with these schemes and subsidies to solve problems for the short run, but also he mentioned that this turns groups of people against each other, right? Because for students it's a different price, for bakers it's a different price. If you're sending dollars abroad, then it's a different price. But your actual dollars that you saved all your life, right? If you're saving cash for your retirement, that's back to 1,500. So basically, you lost, somewhere around 85, 90% of your purchasing power, right? So your goods, and as he tells us later, if you had $100,000 worth of currency in the bank, eventually that became like something like around 5,000, 7,500 $1,000 worth of currency became $5,000 worth of currency. So that's a loss of purchasing power, right? It's it's huge. Anyway, so that means if you thought you were safe for a couple of years, right, and you would not have to work and you can just live off of that, cash, suddenly that evaporated, and then now you were back for having cash only for a month or two. So imagine that happening to your 401k or whatever cash savings you have in a bank. It's absolutely horrible what they are going through. Right, and then he tells us, of course, about all the calamities that this brought, from rolling blackouts because the government and the authorities are trying to save on energy costs, and then they have sometimes just 3 hours worth of electricity, and then the free market steps in, and you have these generator companies who are generating electricity from gasoline, and they are distributing it, but then now even they are having trouble because there are gasoline shortages, and then there's gasoline that is being subsidized, and there are huge lines, and they have to stay in the line for gasoline for hours upon hours, sometimes multiple days, and the gas station doesn't open, and so on. So it's also absolutely horrible. It brings back memories from Romania in the 90s regarding gasoline. We had some issues, a lot, big issues, where people would stay in gas lines, but for days. But also people would steal gasoline from each other's car. Now he doesn't mention that. I'm just saying that this is a fact. What happened in Romania? So you could not keep gasoline in your car because people would either poke a hole in your tank or open the lid and put down a tube, and then just basically suck the gasoline out. So it was horrible, but people did it. So I'm not sure what's going on in Lebanon regarding that, but you can expect something like that happening. Um, right now, back to Lebanon. He says regarding food shortages that it's probably the easiest one to handle because there's a free market for that, and people are speculating a lot, but also are able to stock up and provide when there are spikes or when there are shortages. They are selling it back into the economy and so on. However, there's a lot of speculation, and then there are subsidized items, food items that they have, and that just brings in more chaos because now people are arguing on who gets the subsidized food items, who doesn't, and sometimes people buy up all the subsidized food items and they sell it back when all the subsidized ones are gone. And then he mentions like arguments and shootings even over subsidized milk or something like that. So then we go into the crime, and then we talk about how the crime went up. Objectively speaking, went up. Statistics is what they want to make it out, but clearly crime has went up. General aggression in people went up, but the society is still intact, so we're not seeing a complete breakdown of society. That was similar to Romania. We never went into a complete Mad Max scenario, how some other countries did. I think so. It has a lot to do with culture, to be honest, and looks like Lebanese are, holding it together. So nice people there, as much as they can, and they are helping each other out. But in some cases, in other countries, it has been much, much, much worse. But that still doesn't rule out the situation that people are using machine guns, as he put it, or automatic rifles to settle disputes. And that he describes an incident that happened right under the flat that he lives in, under the building that he lives in. So that has happened, and I'm not sure what the exact situation regarding firearms in Lebanon, but in Romania back in the 90s, where we lived, um, it was highly illegal for people to have firearms, but it was still there. A lot of people just had these AK-47, the Romanian Patriotic Guards AK-47, because they were conscripts or something like that. And when the collapse happened and the revolution happened, a lot of these firearm storages were raided, or actually firearms were sold into the black market by the higher ups in the military, and a lot of people just stole them. They broke into these military bases and took the firearms right out of it. Sometimes they were sold, sometimes they were broken. Just to bring it back to gasoline, my cousin was in the army during that time when the hyperinflation in Romania happened, and he was telling that they would find these huge trucks that they would have in the army, and by the morning, even sometimes they were guarded. They were either scared off or paid off. People with guns came onto the base and actually stole the gasoline right from the tank of the cars, and even some other tanks. They would poke holes and they would bring a couple of gallons or whatever they could take. They would just let the gasoline out. They would take a couple of gallons, or hundreds of gallons, as much as they can carry, take it off from the base, and the rest of the gasoline would be just pouring till morning out on the ground. So it was horrible. But just to kind of mention that whatever the situation regarding firearms is, people find ways, and um, you know things can get very chaotic and hectic, and yeah, use whatever words you want to use. You get the idea. Right, right. Another thing that is, of course, stealing is a big issue. People are stealing, from pickpocketing to other bigger issues happening, people stealing each other's property and so on. However, it's as he mentioned, it's not a complete full Mad Max situation. However, people are desperate. They have lost a lot, and they are still currently losing everything. And when they lose it, they lose it. He mentions about crypto. Now, crypto is not widely used in Lebanon. It was never really adopted that much because a lot of these countries are just traditional in the way how they do business. However, he does mention that a lot of mining came in when there were possibilities to mine cryptos and kind of make a couple of $100 here and there. And I'm sure that people are using cryptos in one way or another, but it's not generally used that you could go into a store and buy produce with cryptos. So that's something to note because let's see what happens right in the United States, in Europe, how well these cryptocurrencies get adopted into the system where your mom and pop store is taking it, or can you buy actual produce with it? Because the people that you're doing business with right now, most likely they will be the people that you will be doing business with during hyperinflation, right? So you have to know that people trust the currency to the last moment, you know, um, in the sense that that the government issued currency is used and will be used until it's completely dead. And that was the case even in Romania. People lost their faith. They would not store it, right? They would not accumulate it for even for a week or a couple of months. But when they were actually transacting, they were transacting in currency. And Right, regarding just the dollar amounts or quote unquote money stuck or currency stuck in the banking system, and then outside of the banking system, that dollars or lollars as he called it, which is sort of a fake crypto dollar amount that is stuck in the banking system and cannot be taken out as cash, is still being used, and sometimes it is used by merchants. You could use that. However, it has its own valuation basically. So he mentioned, $1,000 worth of produce, and that would be regular cash dollars that you would have. It would actually cost around $6,000 in this currency that is kept in the bank and can only circulate in the bank. So that actually gives us a very good comparison on numbers of what happened, right? So in his case, right, very unfortunate, but having around $75,000 worth of currency in the bank, right, that purchasing power turned into $5,000 worth of currency stuck in the bank, right? And he mentions that an iPhone, that is cash $1,000 is around $6,000 currency stuck in the bank. So there you go. You saved, 75, $80,000 worth of the currency, and you thought you could live off of that for 2 years or something like that, and you can't even buy one iPhone with it. So that's inflation for you, and that's not even really hyperinflation, because hyperinflation is just called the speed. If they measure the speed of it, it can take 2 years and it's not hyperinflation. But if the dollar were stuck in the bank, it can take 3 years, 4 years, whatever. You can't take it out. It's there. So it's just inflation. That's how it will be probably put down into Wikipedia when in 10 years or 20 years when people will be reading about this. So very unfortunate. So that was actually the first two parts of the video. If you're interested in my synthesis or analysis about, the three the third, fourth, and fifth part of the video, then subscribe to the channel, and we'll be talking about those too. Now, let's spend a couple of more minutes on, just distilling some wisdom out of this, right? Just distilling a little wisdom out of this, of the whole thing, analyzing all of this info from the first two videos, and having the time machine or going back or knowing what we know now, being in Lebanon in 2019, October 16, a day before everything happens, what would you do? And what were there indicators? Could you help other people or something like that? And there were indicators, but there was never really one big flashing sign that he mentions that this was it. He mentions that there were some opportunities to take dollars out or take cash out of the system at a reduced rate, like losing 15% of your money when there was the opportunity of the peg breaking from 1,500 to 1,800, or you had some opportunities, but by that time it really started, right? That was really, at that point, sort of the beginning of the end. Hopefully, if we go back a little bit back, or at least a couple of days before, that event, what would you do? Right? And immediately, of course, the one thing that he could have done, or anyone could have done, is take out the cash from the bank. However, that did not necessarily help throughout the years, right, or throughout the months that followed. Uh, Actually taking out the cash from the bank and turning it into foreign currency would have helped, right? Because the cash amount of foreign currency, that didn't change, right? So that kept its purchasing power. Now that plays into something interesting, which is you guys in the comment section pointed out, and I actually knew about this way back, but it has a nice name, and the name is milkshake theory. So milkshake theory, I will have a separate video if you guys want, but the basic idea is that the United States is the empire, or the center of the empire, and the Western world, or the world as we know it, that uses dollars as currency, or trade settlements, is the empire, right? And I told you this many times before, that kingdoms or countries are not like empires. Empires kind of fall from the edge. The edges kind of break first, and then it shrinks until it reaches the center, and the center falls last, right? So that's why you have, Roman emperors and so on fiddling while everything burns, even to the last day. People were so in the belief system that it could never fall, that they were there until the last days, and then they suffered a lot. But anyway, milkshake theory is something where the center, right, the controller of the US dollar, the currency, the US dollar, is actually sucking in a lot of US dollars into the center. And all these countries are the edges of the empire that have maybe sometimes debt that is denominated in dollars, or they deal within each other in dollars. As the currency is being sucked back into the center, there are deficiencies. There are dollars that are lacking from the system, and they are not having enough dollars. And these edges of the empire actually are suffering from a dollar deflation, right? And that's definitely happening in Lebanon. By deflation, I mean there's less to go around, right? That's why the value was actually, the peg was broken, right? And then in these countries, there's a dollar deflation happening, and but actually in the center, there's a dollar inflation happening, right? So because it's coming back in towards the center, and people are spending it. Everything is getting expensive here, but dollars themselves are expensing somewhere else. So milkshake theory will, or you can, there's a really good video on YouTube, but we can talk about it in a live video or something like that. However, that is something that I see happening in Lebanon and anywhere else where are, bubbles popping, or name it how you want, is happening. So now regarding milkshake theory, that means that for them it would have been better to actually take out Lebanese liras, turn it into dollars, and just hold the dollars, and stepping back and let things unfold. And as things are unfolding, use those currency out of the system and step back in to purchase assets, right? And as things are hyperinflating or inflating in the local currency, then you are having a better purchasing power. And he mentions something very important about this in later videos again, that this became a cultural phenomenon, that just regular people who did not keep their money in the banking system actually became rich, in the sense that They still had the same amount of money, but now it would compare to your neighbor, you are very rich because his money is stuck in the bank, or his money was in Lebanese liras, right? And I keep telling Lebanese liras, but you have to understand, if you step back and universalize this idea. Basically, I'm saying his money was in the currency of the country, right? And his money was in the bank, and that was stuck. So compared to that, the neighbor who just had, a couple of thousands of dollars set aside somewhere in a bank deposit box. I don't know, to be honest, what happened to with bank deposit box, but let's just say it was outside of the system somewhere, or even in a foreign country, preferably. Then now he could step back and purchase some assets, because these assets are being sold now on the cheap by people who are suffering, unfortunately. And that happened in Romania as well, in my experience, when the bank got closed. So that tells us right there that, now you may say, having money outside the system, yes, that is a particular thing that they could have done. But generalizing it is basically not being in the herd. That's how I would say it, right? Because when the fleecing happens, right, of inflation or hyperinflation, it's always the herd that is getting fleeced, and you stepping outside of that, it's not for me. Yes, it might sound kooky or whatever that you think I'm doing right now. However, if you're not in the herd, then the fleecing that happens won't necessarily be as bad for you. And in comparison, you're actually getting rich from the perspective of others who are getting the haircut, right? So that's the first part, right? And then, of course, this means that not, yeah, not being in the system helps in these cases, right? So let's just put it that way. Now I'm not sure if it would make sense to, of course, hold $75,000 or something like that in cash. I think that would be crazy, but you can probably come up with some other ideas of what you should do, and you should never share in the comment section what you do. I'm just, internally think about things. But everything has its own risks, so I'm not advising that at all. However, maybe a couple of months worth of expenses, having in a safety deposit box or something like that, or at least outside of the banking system, could work for you, right? So that would be the first biggest lesson. The second biggest lesson is actually, even dollars are inflating compared to produce and prices and wherever there's a shortage. So to understand this, let's just say something that was $1 prior to the whole calamity happening, right? So October 2019. Before that, let's just say some bottled water, or pick something, a bread or whatever. Let's just make something up. The cost of it is $1. So you go into the store and you bring your shiny dollar, right? And you go in and you buy some tap water or sparkling water or some beer or bread or whatever, and you put it in your bag and you go out. Then suddenly the peg breaks, right? And right, or interchangeably, before October 2019, instead of that shiny dollar, you could have taken 1,500 liras and do the exact same thing, right? Suddenly now the peg breaks and it takes 1,800 liters. That's suddenly 5,000, 10,000, now 20,000, right? 20,000 came back like 18,000 in recent months, but whatever. Let's just go with 20,000. So you go with 20,000. Now, if you were storing the currency of the land, now you need to bring in 20,000 of those liras to buy the exact same bread. Not true. You actually need more. Because during hyperinflation and because of the shortages, it has gotten worse. Because there are shortages, I mean, think about like all the trouble with gasoline that we just talked about. Do you think it didn't go up in price? Of course it went up in price. If it would have went up from in price from 1,500 to 20,000, that would be just inflation. That would mean it went up nominally, but it also went up in real terms. So technically now, 2021, bringing that dollar into the store, that shiny dollar, doesn't buy the same loaf of bread. You now actually need to bring $2, right? You need to bring $2 into the store to buy the same bread or beer or water or pig or beans or whatever you like. But if the guy stored his wealth in Lebanese liras, then it would have been 20,000. Now it's 40,000 or somewhere in between. I'm just working with some nice rounded numbers, right? So actually, the guy who saved the produce or the guy who saved the cans of beans or something like that, that was probably even better than storing it in US dollars. So technically, if we would now go back to the example, of with the time machine and you wake up in July or something like that in 2019 and you live in Lebanon, ideally you take out the money from the banking system, you take it out in dollars or something else, not the local currency that is being inflated, but you also start purchasing stuff for yourself and for your family. So when this will happen, you don't have to spend those precious dollars now double the price during the collapse or during the calamities. So you're actually storing food or storing anything else that you need, right? Generators and so on. So actually preparing like that. And I wanted to bring this up because a lot of you guys, and rightly so, are talking about precious metals, and in the next video we'll expand on that and what he tells us. However, think about that. Do you really want to, whether it's precious metals, whether it's foreign currency or whatever it is, do you really want to be spending that during the hyperinflation to buy cans of soup? Wouldn't it be just better to have the cans of soup now when you know the price, when you know exactly how you need and so on? Now, of course, that could scare you into becoming, start packing and start storing everything and spending all your cash. But no. You need the cash and you need the foreign currency and you need that for many other things and expenses and even debt that you have that you need to cover even during these times, right? So it's not so much in going all crazy into one asset, I turn it all into precious metals and I'll just sit back. No, you'll need to spend those precious metals in double during hyperinflation to buy the same cans of beans or something like that. It might happen, or it might actually increase much in value, and you're actually right. Could happen. I'm just saying there are cases where things will not work out as you plan. So it's in my perspective, it's better to diversify. have some foreign currency, if you're living in Lebanon at least, have some foreign currency, have some precious metals, have some actually preparedness, very important, probably the first stuff that you would need to think about. Actually try to warn your family members about it, right? So they are somewhat prepared, because if not, well, guess what? You will be have to helping them, and as you should, right? But isn't it not easier to help them by just letting them know that they should prepare in one way or another, instead of actually, trying to spend whatever you need to spend during hyperinflation, or during the economic calamity, or during deflation, whatever comes, and then needing to help them that way, you know. So, and this is, we're not doing anything extreme here. We're just playing out scenarios in our heads based on knowledge that was, shared from my grandmother to my father to myself, from Ali, and from other people that I talked about, from Venezuela and so on. And now Argentina. I didn't know too much about the Argentina situation, but luckily we found someone who's willing to share, and he's very knowledgeable. So I hope you check that out, that interview series out as well. So back to the thing, back to being prepared, back to the time machine at October 2019. What I wanted to tell you is that going into one asset class only, and then putting your arms around and waiting it out, might not work out as well as you think. Just because you read it in a book, or someone else who is really in the same ecosystem as you are thinking about. I'm not saying I know everything, but I'm trying to observe things from many, 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 many different angles, and having conversations with people who are experiencing hyperinflation or economic calamities now in their countries. So not just one asset class, very important, right? The other thing that we mentioned in our next video, that I will be doing the analysis of the rest of the videos about real estate and precious metals. We'll talk about those. The other thing I wanted to mention, that just dollars, $1 is 1,500, another dollar stuck in the system is $3,900, then another one is what, $5,000, right? Then prices, floating prices, $1,000 cash is actually $6,000 in the banking system, that is stuck in the banking system. Then floating currency valuations. And okay, what do we learn from this? What we learn from this is actually they are making up the rules as they go. So unpredictability, right? Predicting that you will not be able to predict what will happen. That's for sure. So what you need to know is that, as I mentioned about the fleecing, that's a dynamic situation. It's not like, okay, if I stay just in here in this little corner, I will be able to look at what's happening. No. This is a dynamic situation, and as the banking system, or Lebanese government, or however you want to put it, is seeing where these assets are being relocated during the 2-year hyperinflation period, they make up new rules to move the fleecing from one part of the herd to the other, to the other, to the other. So you need to be flexible. You need to actually stay on top of the game, and you need to change. You need to watch more videos from the Schlepp, my channel, right? So make sure you subscribe, because we're talking about these things, and we'll be having more guests on. Right. So actually it's dynamic. It's very, very dynamic, and you need to make sure that there are incentives put out by government where you should put some stuff. There are things where you can predict that may be a trap, right? Definitely prior hyperinflation, but during hyperinflation, they are in distress as well. Government is in distress. They want to keep power. They want society not to, you know, break down. So they will give you some incentives, right? And we'll talk about real estate in the next video. So one incentive that we he mentioned came up in real estate and that sort of stuff. But staying on top of your game and actually looking at things how they are, you know, and he tells a story about that he's trying to do this, right? Because the dollar is actually fluctuating as waves. We talked about waves in my previous videos, right? And the waves are happening there as well, you know. And then some people are starting to think that, okay, everything's turning back to normal, and the dollar amount, you know, lira dollar chart, the dollar in value or in purchasing power goes up against the lira and starts falling back because everything's going to be turning back to normal. And then suddenly it goes up again and goes back again. So regarding this, you know, very easy thing that he observed, right, and very smart of him, is that, you know, he can see that the herd is moving to the other corner, and he's saying, well, why are they moving there? Because of the media, because of many other things that's happening. And well, but if he actually goes a field, then does a field study, right, and goes out and goes into the exchange houses, and he asks, hey, I have some Lebanese lira, can I buy some dollars? And well, okay, I guess they are having a hard time selling the dollar back to you, or if they do, the price difference between what they buy and what they sell is so huge that tells him, you know, that tells us that the people who are actually changing the money are not falling for the media tricks or for the government tricks. You know, so the field study says that the trend is still way good, like way up. It's still trending up, and these dips in the purchasing power of the U.S. dollars are really there to, as he put it, suck in the dollars from the current population, who, from remittances, from other people sending help, you know, to the country, or people, sometimes fathers go away to neighboring countries working there, sending money back, or full families go and you know, try to have some business opportunities. And as they are making foreign currencies, you know, there are these false incentives to trade them back into Lebanese liras. But he does tell us about the banking system, and the faith in the banking system was completely lost. So I don't think that is going to be happening very time soon, that they were putting it be back. But people try to speculate and expecting that, okay, maybe things are getting back to normal. When just by this field study is like immediately tells you that the people who are in the know and who are profiting from hyperinflation, they are not expecting that. Now, a couple of words about media and just the Lebanese media. So I don't know too much about Lebanese media. However, you know, from my experience from the Romanian hyperinflation and what he tells, it's fairly similar, right? It's fairly similar that the media tries to position itself on the side of the people, and it's constantly telling people that yes, the, you know, whoever did this or whoever is doing this will be held accountable, and we the people will not stand for this, and on and on and on. But they are having a quote unquote trouble identifying who is actually behind this. Well, of course, it's always the central bank, but or whoever runs the central bank. It's more complex than that, but that's an easy, quick answer for you, because I know that's what you were looking for. So anyway, the media is always, you know, portraying itself to be on the side of the people, however, never really working too much to usher in change. If the if the powers that be control the media, right? So, and why wouldn't they, of course? So anyway, they are portraying themselves on the side of the people. However, no real change can be brought into the media. He does say there was a sense of hope that things would change when the number of protests and the size of the protest grew in Lebanon, and they were hoping that when this, the level of pain actually reaches the middle class, or possibly the level above the middle class or higher middle class, then things will have to change, because then the people who are sort of in the majority of controlling the power will be able to flip this thing. And it just reached them as well, and reached the higher aboves and higher aboves, and things never changed. And eventually now on social media, everybody is commenting on what should be done, and how people, this is where they meet and they're gonna protest, and nothing really happens. And there's something to learn from that as well. However, at least, he does say the situation hasn't broken down completely, and, for whatever violence is happening, society, thank God, can go on, and there's really no violent means of changing the situation. So I'm happy to hear that they actually are very cultured people, that they acknowledge the fact that violence is not the answer, right? Right. So, yes, we could talk about media more, but I think let's just leave it at that. Um, Political situation in Lebanon, I don't necessarily want to go into. He has his opinions, and we should listen to that. I don't know too much about the political situation, but I do want to mention that uh, these economy and politics goes hand in hand, right? And political changes, economic changes, political changes, and it always goes one with the other. So it's something to look out for. And this could mean that as economic calamities are happening, the government, or the in our case the Politburo or whatever, is trying to grasp more and more and more. However, you can also put that on the flip side, as the political situation is changing and the power grab is tightening. That means also that that there's an economic change in the back end that's happening, that they don't want to lose control of. Now, what will happen, we'll know in a couple of years, but just to know, it goes hand in hand, and things can slip fast. So you have to think about diversifying politically, in the sense that, think about passports, think about countries, borders, you know, authorities, and diversifying as much as you can globally as well. So look for opportunities as well, outside of the box, I should say. Yes. All right. So yes, in the next video we'll be continuing with still from this interview. It's a lot of information that was put on there. Um, we'll be talking about a little bit about precious metals, real estate, and some other interesting topics that he brought up, and then we'll be looking for opportunities there as well. But and we'll do some live chat as well, where you have a lot of questions, hopefully, and then I can do I can do my best to answer them. I know you guys talked about cryptos and cash a lot in these situations, and we'll have some thoughts about that as well. However, diversifying is a pretty good measurement of safety. All right, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll be talking much more about this, And there are another set of interviews coming out with people from other countries who have went through economic calamities. So we'll be talking with them. I'll be asking some questions. We'll hopefully talk with Ali again and gather your questions. And if you have questions, then, and if you're a member on buymeacoffee.com/starpath academy, then you can post under the videos the questions there, and I will read them, collect them, and ask the people who I interview these questions, and hopefully we can get a fuller knowledge of what's happening. But please take a look at things from many different perspectives. And it's totally fine if you don't agree with me, or if you don't agree with the interview, or whoever's being asked about regarding questions. You have to look at things from many different perspectives. You have to keep an open mind, open eye, and open ears if you want to learn. If not, then you do you, but I think you will be locking out at least half of the population that could teach you. So thank you very much. Like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you get the notifications, hopefully. Or even better, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/starpath academy and hit the follow button and put your email in there, and whenever a new video comes out, then you will be notified. And I also have an Odyssey channel, so link to my Odyssey channel in the description. Thank you very much for all of you who have subscribed there as well. Thank you very much, and talk to you next time.